The Indianapolis Colts are entering a very new era this season. After 3 straight seasons of throwing out washed veteran quarterbacks, it sounds like Indy will finally be looking towards the draft instead.
But wait, there's more!
The Colts also brought in a brand new head coach. There are a lot of changes in Indianapolis, and honestly, they're all very needed. Simply put, the Colts were really bad last year. It was the 5th and ultimately last season with Frank Reich as head coach. Indianapolis started 3-5-1 and Reich was fired, which led to Jeff Saturday being named the interim head coach. You would think a change of coaching might help the team perform a little bit better, and that definitely wasn't the case. They were actually even worse under Saturday, which was hard to do, and they finished the season 4-12-1. The real story of the Colts' struggles last season was actually the poor play of Matt Ryan. The Colts traded for him in the offseason to try to fix their quarterback issues, and that was of course after Indy tried and failed with veterans Phillip Rivers and Carson Wentz. Indy really has been in quite the quarterback hole since Andrew Luck abruptly retired. The Colts did also end up releasing Matt Ryan after the season too, so Indy is really starting from scratch at quarterback and head coach. The Colts hired Frank Reich back in 2018 after he helped the Eagles make the Super Bowl as their offensive coordinator. Clearly that worked out so well that the Colts wanted to try it again, and Indy hired Eagles offensive coordinator Shane Steichen to be their next head coach. He had a lot of success in Philly, specifically helping with the development of Jalen Hurts. Indy got their new head coach, but the Colts haven't been very busy this offseason. They did sign wide receiver Isaiah McKenzie. He's coming off of a career year with the Bills with over 400 yards. Indianapolis is obviously planning to draft a quarterback at the draft, but if he isn't ready to start or needs to sit for a while, they did go out and sign Gardner Minshew. Minshew was the backup in Philadelphia for the last 2 years, so luckily there is already the familiarity there with Steichen. On defense, the Colts signed 2 defensive linemen that should make a pretty big impact next season. Sam Ebukam signed with Indy after he spent his last 2 years in San Francisco, and he's had at least 3 sacks in each of the past 5 seasons, including 3 straight years with 4.5 sacks. The other interesting deal was Taven Bryan. He was a first-round pick in 2018, but didn't really have much success, but he did have a career-high 3 sacks last season with the Browns. He'll probably just end up being a reliable rotation piece. At the very least though, the Colts defense is going to look pretty different after they traded away Stephon Gilmore for a 5th round pick. Also, it's not very flashy, but the Colts did sign kicker Matt Gay. They had some kicking problems in 2022, so getting a reliable kicker should be pretty helpful. The Colts have 9 selections at the 2023 NFL draft, but obviously the big one everyone really cares about is the 4th overall pick. It sure does seem like the general consensus is that the Colts are going to use that pick on a quarterback, and I'd honestly be concerned if they didn't. Being at 4 will likely put him out of the running for Bryce Young and maybe even CJ Stroud, so that essentially leaves Indy with the rest of the quarterbacks on the board. And the other top 2 are Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. Mel Kiper put out his 4th mock draft and has the Colts going with Levis. He does have the other 3 passers going 1 through 3 though, so that really does force the Colts into Levis. Levis is Kiper's number 2 quarterback in the class. He credits his down 2022 season to injuries and the fact that Kentucky did lose a lot of talent from the season prior. Kiper claims Levis has a pretty high floor and will be able to start week 1 for the Colts. Todd McShay though has the Colts actually trading up 1 spot with the Cardinals to snag Anthony Richardson. He doesn't think the Colts can afford to stay at 4 if they're truly sold on either Richardson or Levis. There's definitely a lot of risk with Richardson, but if he can put it all together, he could be really good. Daniel Jeremiah also has the Colts going with Anthony Richardson in his 3rd mock, but has him slipping to 4. He did note that Richardson could potentially be really fun to watch in a Shane Steichen offense. Lance Zierlein had, I think, the most interesting mock draft for the Colts. He actually had a trade where the Colts got Lamar Jackson, and Baltimore ultimately ended up with that number 4 pick to use on CJ Stroud. Even if you disagree, at the very least, it's a very interesting idea. The Colts do have some interesting pieces already on that roster to build around. I would expect the offense to continue to run through Jonathan Taylor next season. I mean, he did deal with injuries last season, but he's still likely the focal point of that offense. As for the passing game, the clear top wide receiver in Indy is definitely Michael Pittman Jr. He's turned into a pretty reliable reliable wideout, honestly. He did have almost 1,000 yards in 2022, despite the circus of a quarterback situation going on. Alec Pierce was honestly a pretty nice surprise. He's entering his second year on the team, and he was solid as a rookie with almost 600 yards. At tight end, the Colts had two guys, Kylan Granton and Jelani Woods, go for over 300 yards last year. So there is some talent there. The offensive line is actually a little bit concerning though. It's a middle of the pack unit, and Quentin Nelson is coming off of the worst season of his career. Braden Smith has proven to be a solid tackle on that right side though, and he was the Colts' best offensive lineman last season. Opposite of him was Bernard Ryman, who was a rookie last year. He started off rough, but improved over the season, so if he can continue to develop, the Colts line should be in a much better spot, especially if Nelson can bounce back. On the other side of the ball, defensive line is definitely stronger. DeForest Buckner is a big name. He had 8 sacks last season at defensive tackle. Coming off the edge is Kwity Paye, and he's just continued to get better. He was a first rounder in 2021 and has 10 sacks in his career, 6 of which came in last season. Shaquille Leonard had an unfortunate season in 2022. He missed the beginning of the year recovering from back surgery, and once he returned in week 4, he suffered a concussion and a broken nose. Later, Leonard dealt with more back issues and ultimately only played in 3 games all season. If he can return to full health, that would be big for Indianapolis. If some of the Colts' key players can just return to form and stay healthy, Indy should vastly improve from last year. Now, I don't think it's a secret, and I don't think many people would disagree as of right now at least, but I don't really expect the Colts to be very good next season. But that's okay. Indianapolis has clearly felt they had a good roster for the last few years and believed that they were just a quarterback away, but that just wasn't the case. The Colts had a lot more problems than just Matt Ryan last season. It was time for Indy to clean house, and now the Colts have to navigate this new era, and Shane Steichen is the biggest piece of that puzzle. I actually like Frank Reich as a head coach, and I do think he'll have success in Carolina. With what he was given in Indy, he was pretty solid in my opinion. That being said, it was really time for a change in Indy. It'll be interesting to see what Shane Steichen looks like outside of Philly. I think it's pretty safe to say that he was quite literally blessed with a loaded offense that had an elite offensive line and 2 stud wide receivers, but none of those things are the case in Indianapolis, so life definitely won't be as easy. The biggest reason Indy hired Steichen is probably to develop a younger passer. I think Chris Ballard and maybe even Jim Irsay had the realization that trying out a new old vet every single season wasn't going to work. You gotta go young eventually and have to have a top guy, and that's what the Colts are going to shoot for at this year's draft. It's a shame that the Colts won't be able to get Bryce Young and probably not CJ Stroud either, although more and more reports have come out and make the Colts selecting Stroud at 4 not so far-fetched, but honestly, who really knows who the Colts front office is really in love with as of right now? I really thought that there was a chance at one point that the Colts could trade up to 1 and get whoever they wanted, but obviously that's not going to happen. Although it is super possible that they trade up with the Cardinals just to make sure a different team doesn't jump them. At the end of the day, I'd bet the Colts are going to be picking between Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. Richardson is essentially a lottery ticket. He could be incredible if he puts it all together, or he could be a bust if he doesn't. I honestly prefer Will Levis and think he has a much better chance of becoming a good pro, but at the end of the day, that's the big decision for the Colts that will shape the future of the franchise and the Shane Steichen era in Indianapolis.